Hey, I brought this chair out because I don't have nearly the energy that everyone else seems to have. I'm a bit sick today, which just the fact that I'm here shows my insatiable need for validation off of strangers. Yeah. I also like wrote the set, and then I was like, I have to remember this, and then I got sick, and I was like, well, I don't have a PhD in memorizing stuff, so it's just gonna make it up as I go along. I'm Greg. I study philosophy. Yeah, that's the usual reaction that I get, actually. You know, you can imagine I'm at a party, and I'm already grey crack, obviously, at a party, and Tony is there, and he's a carpenter or something, and Jen's there, and she's a CEO of some company. The real Jen worked in a nail bar. I'm fucking woke or whatever, right? So CEO or whatever. In my imagination, she's gonna rise to the top. And they're like, what do you do, Greg? And I say, well, I teach philosophy to angsty college undergrads who are trying to find meaning in a world where there isn't any, which goes down swell at a party, obviously. And they don't say anything back to that. Obviously, what is there to say to that? They're probably just thinking, I've got a philosophy, got a real fucking job, or whatever. So I find myself in the position of having to justify what I do a lot, which I can do quite well because philosophy equips me with peddling absolute bullshit all the time. So you know, this is what I'm going to do for you tonight. Bright Club, Breitbart. It sounds the same, huh? It's like Bright Bar Comedy Club for the intellectual, comedy-loving Nazi in all of us, sir. So I'm going to justify myself to you, to all the Tony and Jens out there, and to myself, really, because I spend most of my time just wondering what the fuck am I doing in my life, obviously. So let's start there. Does anyone know what philosophy is? I don't know. I mean, here's a brief history of the beginning of philosophy. A long time ago, I forgot to check the fucking dates, actually, before I wrote the set, so sorry. There's Homer. Homer's not a philosopher. He's probably not even a real person, but the big Greek stories, right? The Greek myths, right? He's like, Zeus is up there, fucking tearing Aphrodite a new one. It's just lots of gods fucking each other and in their spare time fucking over the lives of human beings. And eventually, at around 600 BC, some lad is walking around and he's like, yeah, sound, but like, what really is stuff? What is it actually, right? Let's examine this or whatever, you know, let's figure it out, right? And it's a revolutionary question at the time. His answer, not so great. He says, water, maybe, I don't know. In his defense, you know, we need water to grow shit, or I need water to drink water or whatever. I don't know, you know. It was before the time they had to give reasons for what they thought. They just like, water, and then someone else was like, no, it's air. And someone else was like, fire, and at this point they just sound like a fucking Captain Planet ripoff. Fucking vowing to rid the world of fairy tale folk shit or whatever. You know, but I think it's still a radical move. The radical move to say, well, let's examine the world in light of reason, right? And ask the question, why? Which is what everyone thinks that I do at my time, is just go, why this or whatever. The only real why question I ask myself is, why am I not doing something more financially viable? Does this gig pay, actually, speaking of which? Do I get paid? Do I get paid for this? It's the same as teaching philosophy as a career, so fuck it, you know. Okay, so we have this move from myth, from story, to reason or whatever, right? Which is great, but it doesn't mean that we don't understand as philosophers, as if we're some unit or whatever, I don't know. Us philosophers, we know the power of story nonetheless, right? So there's like Socrates, the first big philosophical giant of the West. He often drew on Greek myth to illustrate certain points that he was making. Another great philosopher, St. Augustine. My research is not even on St. Augustine, actually, but I'm not going to bore you all with what I actually do. So I'll talk about people more relevant to Irish society, like priests and stuff. Augustine understood the power of story, right? he's good, religious, pious fellow, famously said, Lord, make me chaste, right? Actually, he was a bit more realistic than that. He said, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Huh? It's a little wink face written in Latin there beside that. His scribe was like, should I put the wink face in? Put it in there. Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Pope Francis had the foresight not to use that as a line of defense in the church scandals. So, just give me one, all right? I'm sorry, I'm talking about the church. I know it's like 5 years too late or whatever, but I wasn't doing comedy then, or never again. So yeah, St. Augustine is the power of story, right? And he has this great text called the Confessions where he's studying what is memory, right? And he's battling against this idea at the time. People are trying to figure out what memory is, and they're like, well, okay, I see a table, and somehow that table gets kind of zapped into my head, and I have a table-shaped head now or whatever. And that was actually, it's great. Philosophers are great at asking questions, not great at answers. Like, it was a big problem for a while. Like, well, why isn't our head fucking table-shaped, you know? I don't understand. So you know, he's like, that's not the case, right? He's like, it's not about a table in my head, but it's about that table that I was saying my rosaries in, and then the beautiful woman walked by, and I forgot my religious vows, and oh, I'm a sinner, or whatever, you know. It's like our memory is the story that we tell ourselves about who we are, right? It's where we are kept, right? So, you know, you've probably heard that word Kogi Dough, right? Kogi Dough, you've probably heard, I don't know, you know. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, right? The cogito is the thinking thing. And Augustine reminds us, as if we already knew, he reminds us that the word cogito is taken from the Latin cogo, which means to collect. And so who I am, my thinking thing, is the collection of myself from my memories, my experiences, my desires, you know, my thoughts, etc. Incidentally, this is what he thought confession was, right? Confession was the act of recollecting myself in light of my faith in God in a way that he thought would bring eternal happiness, and it obviously didn't work out that way. But listen, good ideas, deplorable consequences, right? So, okay, story, right? Obviously what this tells us, though, is that philosophy can't actually give us a story, right? It can't. Augustine understood the power of story from a well-grounded philosophical investigation of the nature of memory, but he finds his story in the Christian faith, right? I find my story in ancient Chinese mysticism or some bullshit. And I know I came on here, I talked about doing philosophy, and you're already a little bit skeptical. And maybe I've brought you back in, and now you're like, dig yourself out of this hole, Greg. I don't know. I'm wearing magic bracelets, as you can see. But I love it. I have a shaman. He's great. I go see him. I'm like, fucking heal me, shaman. And he does, or at least I think he does. I don't know. But I love it, and I feel good. And like, why? But also, why not? You know, it's great. I know you're looking at me with the same look of despair and disbelief that stares me back in the mirror every morning when I wake up. So, one person understood that there. They were like, I got you, Greg. I know exactly what you're talking about. Look, all I'm trying to say is the world is magic, right? It's mental. We're here, and that's amazing, right? And philosophy, you know, the famous line, I know that I don't know, right? It teaches us something about the limits of our knowledge. We don't have a fucking clue. We're not good at giving answers, but nobody really, maybe science is, but even if you look at you might think like, oh, well, we don't have stories anymore, Greg, now we have science. And you're like, yeah, but if you look at what they're saying now, maybe the physicist here will fucking whip me a new one when she gets back on, but like, you know, it's like the Earth is like a two-dimensional hologram across the event horizon of a black hole. Like, that's a story that Homer is jealous of right now. He's up there, I wish I had thought about that, you know? Fuck. It's great, you know? So philosophy, unless you want your story to be just despair and misery, you need to find your story elsewhere. It's true. So, yeah. I forgot the rest of the set, obviously. Don't worry about it. I'll just consult my notes here. My story. Will I go back over the Augustine jokes about Lord, make me chaste, but not yet? By making us aware of our ignorance, philosophy can teach us to ask better questions that are at the basis of everything. Because oftentimes we give bad answers because we have bad questions, and so we get better and better questions. And I think there's something powerful about being cast back upon your ignorance, to if only to be opened up again, and stare at the world with a childlike wonder. So I'll leave you with this one. The philosopher that I do study, he was a Nazi, actually. That's Martin Heidegger's his name. I guess he would have gone down swell here at Bright Comedy Club, but anyway, he was once asked, what use is philosophy, right? And he said, there isn't one, it's useless, right? Which was great for all of it. I don't put that down in my grant applications or whatever. What are you gonna do? I don't fucking know. Ask better questions, woohoo, But he's speaking to this experience, isn't he? He says, everyone's trying to figure out what to do with philosophy, but they haven't figured out that philosophy does something to the human being. And I know philosophy, it sounds like a creepy priest in that sentence, but what did you do to me, philosophy? He's speaking to this experience of being thrown back against the weight of our ignorance, right? If only to be opened up again and, actually talk to people. When you don't know, right, you stop clinging on to that little story we have of ourselves, and we start saying, well, what do you think, right? I don't know. Everyone's so convinced of what they know now. And if you actually, if you look at what scientists are saying now, they don't know either. They're like, there's, 12-dimensional strings vibrating. Anyway, so yeah, philosophy doesn't have a use, it's useless, right? But it opens us up again, I think, and then we can build up new stories from that position. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.